So I've got a question. Remember during the early days of the pandemic when everyone started baking bread? Sort of early on when things were at their worst, way before there was a vaccine. It's amazing, that time already feels fuzzy in my memory. Not that I'm complaining. It's nice to let that part of time fade away. But humor me for a second and go back there with me, because this is a very important question. Did anyone here participate in the bread baking madness? Okay, a few hands. Did anyone here learn how to make a sourdough starter? No, some head shakes, maybe one or two hands. So I started baking bread during that time, and man, it was nuts. Remember the yeast shortage? I don't know if you had that here, but I did. I'd say it was right up there with the toilet paper shortage. I remember someone posted on Facebook that the Whole Foods in the next town over from me on Long Island had yeast in stock, and I immediately bolted out from my makeshift work-from-home office space, grabbed a mask, grabbed gloves, it was that far down the line, and drove 20 minutes only to stand in a line that wove through the entire parking lot. An hour or two later, I exited with my prize, dry instant yeast. And I got to work right away making not sourdough, but challah. Fresh homemade challah every Friday that I could, not just for me and my family, but for our neighbors too. Taken out of the oven with masks on and carefully wrapped up to be left on their front steps. As I got my hands dirty making challah week after week, experimenting with variations and substitutions and different flavors, anything from cinnamon raisin to goat cheese pesto, I came to better understand the sacred ingredients that go into challah. The grains, the water, the yeast, even the eggs and salt have sacred qualities that our ancestors understood and discovered and wrote about in our ancient texts. It was also around this time that I entered rabbinical school and began reading through the Torah with a new perspective. Whenever I'd read about the grain harvest or Lot's wife becoming a pillar of salt, or any number of water wells, or about the symbolism of eggs in our Passover Haggadah, I thought about my challah and how amazing it is that every week on my own kitchen table, I get to use all these ingredients, all these stories embedded within them, and knead and braid and twist them together into one delicious sacred bread. And throughout this whole process, week after week, one thing was consistent: the sacrifice of the challah. When my dough was done rising, before I'd put it into strands, I'd say a special blessing. Not the blessing we say when we eat challah, but this blessing: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehafrish challah. Blessed are you, Adonai, divine mystery of the universe, who makes us holy through mitzvot and commands us to separate the challah. Then I'd rip off a golf ball-sized piece of dough, hold it up in front of whoever was present, usually my very patient fiance, and exclaim, Zot ha-challah, this is the challah. This little piece of challah that I ripped off, not everyone knows this. I didn't know this not too long ago, but that's the actual challah. That's the part that makes it authentic, that makes our Shabbat bread holy and connects us to our ancestors. Ripping off this symbolic sacrifice that we don't eat can be traced all the way back to biblical times, to the very Torah portion that we read this week. In Challah, we read, Bevoachem el haaretz, v'haya ba'alchachem milechem haaretz, tarimu teruma la'Adonai, reishit aristotechem. When you enter the land, and you eat of the bread of the land, you shall set some aside as a gift to Adonai, as the first yield of your baking. You shall set aside a challah as a gift. You shall set it aside as a gift throughout every generation. L'dorotechem, every generation. Now, we might not all be farmers anymore like we were in the ancient world, and we don't have these massive farms, which means we don't have crops that we need to sacrifice. We're exempt from sacrifice, right? Times have changed. Well, no, not exactly. It's not just crops and animals that were sacrificed in the ancient world, but it was man-made stuff that we baked in our kitchens. We're supposed to take a little bit and offer it up as a gift. Now, this sacrifice admittedly looks different today. I don't bring it to an altar on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. I think that would cause a lot of issues, but I do leave this little bit in the oven much longer than the rest of my bread until it burns up. And then, and I added this part in, before sitting down for my Shabbat dinner, I take this little burnt challah, open up my back door, and chuck it into the woods, returning a little bit of these sacred ingredients to the nature they came from, to God. For me, this ritual not only connects me with my ancestors, with each generation of Jews that came before me, but also grounds me in a humbling gratitude practice. That little piece of burnt dough serves as a reminder to me that the things I've been given are not for my use alone. That whatever resources I receive, whether good health, money, wisdom, whatever gifts come my way in life, I must first consider how to offer these gifts up to something holy. The ritual described in these verses of Torah instruct us to always consider how we can use what we have to first benefit others before benefiting ourselves. In fact, the 15th century biblical commentator Sforno teaches us that when we offer a gift to others, we are then blessed in return. He asserts that it is this commandment to separate the challah and offer it back to the universe is what opens us up to receive blessings from God. It's sort of like the Jewish version of karma. So on this Shabbat, I invite us all to consider what gifts we have as individuals. And how can we offer up a little bit of them to a holy purpose as a gift to God and to others? Whether it's volunteering at a soup kitchen one evening a week before eating your own dinner, or committing to deciding how you're going to divide up your annual charity contributions before planning your own vacation, or even baking an extra loaf of bread for your neighbor. Shabbat Shalom.